Pag na-convict daw mga kababayan si Sara Duterte at matanggal sa pagiging vice-presidente, ang tatakbong presidente si Digong. Ito ngayon mga kababayan yung sabi ni Pantaleon Alvarez. Talaga niya Mr. Maravillas, mga ganit. Ano ba yung tawag ninyo sa ganyang uri ng mga tao kung hindi ganit? Yan o. Sabi dito sa report ng abogado.com.ph, sabi ni Alvarez, if VP Sara is removed, Rudy Duterte can run for president again. Nakatungkod na nga lang. Paanong tatakbo? Baka niya kasi Mr. Maravillas, habuli na si Digong ng Interpol. Kaya tatakbo patakas sa Interpol para papanagutin siguro sa ICC. Maniwala pa kami Pantaleon. Pero kung tatakbo sa tatakbo sa election sa 2028, medyo malabo na po. O kahit palimbawa tumakbo si Digong. Buti kung hindi pa bitawan ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos yung another sword of Damocles. Series na yan. Yun nga pong ICC. Kung bitawan na ng ating Pangulo, malamang kakandidato si Digong mga kababayan, nasa loob na ng kulungan ng ICC. Diba? Kasi unang-una, wala nga naman hayaan ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos na makabalik pa sila, na in-impeach na nga yung anak, tinanggal na bilang vice-presidente, kasi banta sa seguridad ng ating bansa. Tama yung analysis ni Marcos loyalist Benji Contreras, na kasama ko sa Tagaytay City, kasama namin ni Mrs. para sa seminar, workshop seminar na inisponsora ng Presidential Communications Office. Salamat pala sa binigay na sa amin ni Mrs. Certificate of Participation, Dante Maravillas, Bella Maravillas has successfully participated in the event entitled Unicom Workshop for Social Media Stakeholders. Ayan pa ginawa sa Tagaytay City sa Development Academy of the Philippines, Tagaytay City Conference Center and Hotel. Signed, Emerald Ann Ridao, Senior Undersecretary for Digital Services, Presidential Communication Officer. Ayos na ayos. Di ba? Mga kababayan, yan kasama kami ni Mrs. Lagi kaming magkasama. O ngayon, niya Mr. Maravillas sinabi ni Benji Contreras? Yan yung post po ni Benji Contreras. Yung picture ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos habang nasa training po sa pagiging Scout Ranger ng Philippine Marines. Sabi niya, si Pangulong Bongbong Marcos ay isang Scout Ranger. Hinasa bilang isang jungle fighter. Never undermine him. He knows when to fire back and hit the enemy hard. Masyado nilang in-underestimate mga kababayan yung Tigre ng Norte. Nang sabi nila, weak leader. At mabait. Mabait naman talaga yung ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos. Pero yung sinasabi nilang weak leader, diba, panic mode na sila ngayon. Calculated po yung mga actions ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos. Nakita ninyo? Ang pumirmang una, mga kababayan sa 4th impeachment, si Sandro Marcos mismo. Ano ang ibig sabihin nun, mga kababayan? At sabi ng ating Pangulong Bongbong, iningian niya ni Sandro yung aking opinion. At trabawan niya ngayon as member ng Congress, kasama sa kanyang mandato bilang congressman. O di ba? Napaka-suwabe ng paliwanag ng ating Pangulo. At sabi ni Sandro Marcos sa isang interview, nakakagulat ba kung bakit ako yung unang pumirma? Pinagbantaan niya yung aking tatay, ang aking nanay, ang aking uncle na si Speaker Martin Romualdez at gustong ipahukayan niya yung bangkay ng aking lolo, dating Pangulong Ferdinand Hidralin Marcos, tapos gustong itapon sa West Philippine Sea. Nakakagulat ba na ako ang pumirma? Ang unang pumirma, in-underestimate ninyo ang pwedeng gawin ng mga Marcoses sa inyo. Kaya tama itong sinabi ni Benji Contreras. Never underestimate him. He knows when to fire back and hit the enemy hard. O ngayon, nasabi ni Pantaleon Alvarez na pag natanggal daw si Sara Duterte bilang Vice Presidente na convict, ang tatakbo sa pagkapangulo sa 2028, si Digong, malamang hindi na mangyari yan. Pwede man mangarap kayo, pero yung mangyari yung inyong pangarap, lalo't yung mga plano ninyo, lagi ninyong sinasabi, pag ang plano po laging sinasabi, hindi natutuloy. Bakit? Kahit itanong ninyo sa mga success coach, pag ang mga plano daw sinasabi, malamang hindi matuloy. Kasi alangan man nayaan ng mga Marcoses, mga kababayan, na si Digong makabalik sa puder. Ang gagawin lang naman po, bibitawan ang lahat ng nakaamba na mga sword of Damocles. That includes mga kababayan, yung ICC. Sinong dapat sisihin yan? Sila, kasi banta ng banta. Announce ng kanilang mga plano. Di na lamang ang kanilang political adversary na dati ka-unit team. Kaya si Jason sa mga kababayan, sumbat ng sumbat. Ito yung post ni Jason sa. Sabi ni Jason sa mga kababayan, do you remember this? Noong panahon na naninikluhod ang Romualdez at Marcos family sa Duterte family, especially to then Davao City Mayor Inday Sara Duterte para tulungan silang manalo sa alalan. Yan o. Pinost yung picture. Tapos ito yung post ni Sandro Marcos. November 21, 2021. Daghang salamat, Mayor Inday Sara Duterte, not only for putting your faith in my father to lead our country, but for your support towards my candidacy as congressman in the 1st District of Ilocos Norte. What a day, something that I will remember for the rest of my life. So anong diferensya doon sa post ni Sandro Marcos? Aber nga, Jason sa, nagpasalamat kasi si Sandro. Kasi unang-una, normal sa tao magpasalamat pag sinusupport. Ngayon, alangan man, nagbanta na sa kanyang tatay na tatanggalan ng ulo. Inimagine na tatanggalan ang ulo. Yung lolo, uhukayin ang bangkay at itatapon sa West Philippine Sea. Nangontrata na ng assassin para ipapatay yung kanyang tatay, nanay at uncle pagkatapos magpapasalamat pa kay Sara Duterte. Unang-una, amanos na po. Bakit amanos? Hindi magiging presidente si Digong kung walang support sa mga Marcoses, lalo kay Amy Marcos. Kasi ang mga Duterte di man kilala sa buong Pilipinas. Ang nagpakilala si Amy Marcos. Amanos? At saka, sino ba nagsimula ng away? Inaaway na nga, pinagbabantaan, tinatawag na bangag, sinisiraan ng dating Pangulong Digong. Si PBBM, hindi pa nga magsalita. Ngayon na lang nagtataga-salita yung na ating Pangulong Bongbong kasi nasubrahan na po, pumalag na po ng pagbantaan siya, pagmumurahin ni Sara Duterte. Pero kinontra pa nga niya yung kanyang mga kaalyado sa Kongreso na impeach si Sara. Kaya lang, yung minority nag-file na ng impeachment. May mandato po ang Kongreso na iproseso. O ngayon, bakit nagpirma si Sandro ng 4th impeachment? Para masiguro po na matatanggal si Sara Duterte bilang Vice Presidente. Kasi pag hindi po matanggal si Sara Duterte bilang Vice Presidente, walang tigil po ang pagbabanta sa buhay ng ating Pangulo na kanyang tatay. Nalusubin ng Palasyo Malacanang para umupo si Sara bilang kapalit ng ating Pangulo na tatay ni Sandro. Sino man ang magugusto sa ganong sitwasyon? Sige nga Jason sa? Magka-unit team sila, kinampanya nga ang campaign manager si Speaker Martin Romualdez. Wala nang ginawa si Sara kundi sumalang na lang magsalita. pati snacks niya. Sagot ni Martin Romualdez. Pagkatapos, nagplano sila ni the little girl na tanggalin si Martin Romualdez, ikodita bilang Speaker of the House. Hindi man po papayag noon si Martin Romualdez. Inabuking kasi po klarado po sa isipan ng mga Marcoses na may plan B po sila. Nakipag-unitin nga si Sara Duterte, yun pala, inaambisyonan in the future na ma-impeach ang ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos. Ang unang hakbang sa plano, alisin si Martin Romualdez as Speaker of the House para mawala po ang knight in shining armor ng ating Pangulo. Then, magpa-file sila ng impeachment para iupo si Sara Duterte. Inabuking po. Kaya nagwawala. Yan ang kwentong naririnig natin sa loob. Kaya simula noon, tinawag na ni Sara Duterte, nag-resign siya sa Partido Lakas NUCD. Tapos tinawag si Martin na tambaluslos. Doon po nagsimula yan. Hindi po paiisa sa inyo ang ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos kasi may experience na siya mula sa kanyang tatay na pinasok ng mga traidor yung Palasyo Malacanang. Kaya nga po, ito yung tingin ko sa patuloy na pagsusuporta ni Amy Marcos. Hanggang dulo daw siya. Isusupport niya si Sara Duterte. Makita niya, Mr. Maravillas, para laging may nakadungaw. Anyway, yun man ang tingin na ngayon ng mga DDS na si Amy Marcos, spy, mangga spy. Pero tingnan ninyo si Amy Marcos. Sabi ng partido, Alyansa ng Bagong Pilipinas, hindi pa rin niya, kasama pa rin si Amy Marcos sa slate, hindi man po tinatanggal. Sabi ni Toby Chanko, campaign manager ng bagong Alyansa ng Bagong Pilipinas. Kaya ngayong start ng kampanya, doon sa Ilocos, nandun pa rin yung picture ni Amy Marcos. Kaya po, nandyan pa rin si Amy Marcos sa Alyansa ng Bagong Pilipinas. Tama naman po, kasi bilang kapatid, magiging masama yung tingin ng ating mga mamamayang Filipino na tatanggalin si Amy Marcos sa slate. Magiging masama on the part ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos. Kaya inayaan na lang, kahit ayaw sumama sa kampanya, nagsasarili sa kampanya si Amy Marcos. Ito, sabi diyan, nagdaos ng press conference sa Lawag City, Ilocos Norte, ang mga kandidatong senador ng Alyansa para sa Bagong Pilipinas bago ang kanilang proclamation rally. Kahit sa press con, wala si Amy, si Ping Lacson, si Tito Soto, si Abalos, si Tol Tolentino, si Manny Pacquiao, si Abi Binay, si Camille Villar, tapos si Erwin Tulfo. Wala si Amy. Pero dito, kasama pa rin mga kababayan. Absent din pala sa press con si Lito Lapid. Nasa shooting pa yata. Tapos si Bong Revilla, Pia Cayetano. O ngayon, going back doon sa topic natin, sa sinabi ni Pantaleon Alvarez na si Digong yung tatakbo. Patakboin ninyo kung gustong tumakbo. Yan yung sabi niya rito. Could former President Rodrigo Duterte return to Malacanang if Vice President Sara Duterte is removed and perpetually disqualified from public office? Sabi po ni former Speaker and now Davao del Norte Representative Pantaleon Alvarez, naniniwala daw siya na pwede. At pinaliwanag niya yung kanyang view sa programa ni Attorney Karen Jimeno sa forefront ng Billionaire News Channel. Sabi rito, Attorney Jimmy Bondok, former Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation executive and now senatorial candidate, Attorney Jimmy Bondok noted that the impeachment process niya carries a penalty of perpetual disqualification from holding public office, which could prevent Sara Duterte from running in 2028. However, Alvarez believes that removing VP Duterte could backfire on her political opponents as it may open the door for her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte, to run again. He pointed out to Article 7, Section 4 of the 1987 Constitution, which states that a sitting president is prohibited from seeking re-election and said this does not explicitly bar a former president from running again after stepping down. Mas disadvantageous anya sa kanila yon kung hindi nga makatakbo si VP Sara. Nandyan pa naman si former President Rodrigo Duterte. Pwede naman siya tumakbo. Remember, ang prohibition sa Constitution ay re-election. Pag sinabi mong re-election, kailangang sitting president siya. Hindi naman sitting president si President Rodrigo Duterte ngayon. He argued. So, pinalalabas niya ito ngayon ng mga point of view para i-discourage po yung mga senador na i-convict si Sara Duterte. Kasi pag ma-convict si Sara Duterte na disqualify perpetually, tatakbo si Digong. Jimeno noted that re-election could also be interpreted as running for the presidency again, regardless of whether one is a sitting president. Alvarez, however, stood firm in his position. Pwede pa. Tingnan mo ha, bakit yung senador magpahinga lang ng 3 taon, takbo ulit? Pwede. Bakit hindi pwede sa dating presidente? Bundok, while intrigued by the argument, admitted he was undecided. He pointed out the vagueness of the Constitution on the matter. He noted how similar debates have emerged in the past, such as when former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo ran for Congress. Pero sabi ni Alvarez, ang malakas dito ay yung equal protection of laws sa Constitution. Kasi kung pwede sa senador, pwede sa congressman, bakit hindi pwede sa former president na nagpahinga na siya? Regardless of whether Rodrigo Duterte decides to run, Bondok believes that the influence of the Duterte family remains strong. Sabihin na natin na hindi tumakbo si President Duterte. Madami pa pong Duterte na pinagkakatiwalaan ng bayan. I think the impeachment of VP Sara is futile if all they want is to reduce the power of the Dutertes. And I'm not speaking I'm very objective here. Sikat naman talaga ang mga Dutertes. Sumikat po dahil sa Marcos. At nanalo si Sara Duterte dahil sa Marcos. Hindi yung paniwala ng mga DDS na nanalo si BBM bilang Pangulo dahil kay Sara. Napakalinaw po. Gusto niyo makita ang ebidensya? Ipakita ko uli po. Yan 32 million na boto ni Sara Duterte. Mga Marcos supporters po ang 32 million. Ang karamihan. Yan Ito man lang po ang supporters ni Sara na mga naka-green. Kaya, sa 32 million mga kababayan, 500,000 man lang po ang mga DDS, 31 million mga Marcos supporters. Ngayon, yung 16 million ni Digong, nang tumakbo bilang presidente, lahat yun mga Marcos supporters. Kinampan niya mga kababayan ni Amy Marcos. O ngayon, kung halimbawa tumakbo si Digong kasi na-impeach at na-convict si Sara Duterte, disqualified na siya perpetually. Kung tumakbo si Digong for president, alangan man, hayaan yun na makabalik. Hayaan siyang makabalik sa Palasyo Malacanang ng mga Marcos. May nakaumang na sword of Damocles yung ICC. Bali? Lalo pa ngayon na in-announce na ni Pantalyon ang kanilang baraha. Masyado kasi kayong madaldal. Kaya kayo napapahamak. Tingnan mo si Sara. Daldal ng daldal. Na-impeach tuloy. Tingnan ninyo yung laman ng articles of impeachment. Ang number 1, yung pagbabanta. Ngayon, nagpa-press con yung Diane Gans kanina tungkol sa mga preparations. Pakinggan po natin. Si Congresswoman Pami Zamora, pagkatapos si Rods Gutierrez, Bicolano, taga dito sa amin sa Legazpi. Pakinggan natin yung press con nila in relation sa impeachment complaint laban kay Sara.
You, Rosalie Cos from UNTV, you're recognized for today's first question. Good morning po, Kongs. Para po kay Kong Rog na bahagi ng prosecution panel for the impeachment trial of VP Duterte, hingin po muna namin yung reaction niyo po sa statement ni SP Cheese yesterday na yun pong impeachment trial ay possible mag-start after the SONA of PBBM in July.
Well, I believe we have to take into consideration po no, na nagbanggit na rin po si SP Cheese Escudero yung kanyang sentiments po even prior to that statement yung tungkol sa SONA. He already mentioned before that while the impeachment court is not convened, they might be able to do preliminary processes such as, for example, yung secretariat nila maghahanda pa ng kanilang rules. They can also do their private consultations already with senators about how to go about it para kapag when in his opinion the Senate is already in session, in which according to him po kailangan ng plenary action, smooth na po yung daloy. So I think yung sinabi po niya na after SONA pa po yung trial, I think it was in reference to yung trial proper po, no? Yung general idea natin kung ano po yung trial, yung paglilitis. But the whole trial per se, there are now advancements. Since the last impeachment hearing, nabanggit nga po ni Senator ni SP Escudero na they might, depending on the secretariat, depending on the rules that are proposed, they might take up. For example, I think one thing that he mentioned was yung pagtanggap ng ebidensya in pre-trial by commissioners and yung actual pre-trial proper. These are things that could be done prior po. So I don't think kasama yun sa timeline na sinasabi niya na after SONA. But all of that said, I think yun po, I think that'll be a reaction. And as always, especially as a member of the prosecution team, we would not want to comment on the propriety of that statement, and we respect and we leave it to the senator judges po on how they see fit to convene po yung impeachment court.
Hindi po ba kayo nasasayangan dun po sa ilang buwang paghihintay, I think almost 5 months, para po ma-resolve yung pong impeachment complaint? Kong Pami can also answer.
In addition po on that, yung whether or not sayang siya, it would really boil down to po yung interpretation po talaga on the timeline that should be followed. I think the SPS made his stand very clear. Although we've heard varying opinions, we've heard even experts on both sides. On one hand po, may mga nagsasabi, and this is just a statement of fact po, no? Not opinion. On one side, some would say that the inclusion of the word forthwith, ang ibig sabihin po nito ay agad. So this being a power under the Constitution that isn't legislative po, no? Dapat po pwedeng gawin kahit walang plenary action. But as mentioned, nagbanggit na po si SP Escudero ang kanyang opinion, and I would assume this would be the opinion of the rest of the Senate, na it requires plenary action like a legislative function. So whether or not sayang po yung 5 months, I guess what they're trying to say is their hands would be tied on that interpretation. So I think yun po yung proper context for taking into the consideration pag pinag-uusapan po yung timeline.
Dun po sa prosecution panel, meron po ba kayong possible options para mas mapaaga yung impeachment trial? For example, encouraging President Marcos Jr. to call for a special session. Kasi si SP Escudero, nagbigay na po siya ng statement na unless magpatawag ng special session si PBBM, hindi po sila makakapag-conduct ng special session. Pero si PBBM made a statement unless the Senate requests him to call for a special session, hindi siya magpapatawag. So parang turuan po kasi.
Opo, to answer the question firstly, ay hindi pa po pinag-uusapan ng prosecution team, but as a personal opinion, I don't think the prosecution team will make any moves in that manner. Hindi po kami mananawagan, only for the simple reason na ayaw po kaming ma-misinterpret as trying to unduly interfere or influence yung yet to be convened impeachment court. Kailan po maintindihan, we will be advocates po in that court. And of course, anything that we might say or do might be tainted with bias. So we'd rather it not come from us. But kagaya ng sinabi na po ni SP Escudero, nabanggit na po na siya, na he is of the opinion na pwede naman po mag-call ng special session ng Presidente. Kahit ang Presidente sa isang press con, sinabi niya na he may call a special session. So we leave it to them na lang po on that decision. But as far as we're concerned, that would be a call on their parts na lang po.
Well, on my end, and on our end, kahit hindi naman ako part ng prosecution team, si Speaker Martin Romualdez has already said that Congress respects and will not pressure the Senate. Although there are many legal luminaries who are advising the Senate to start right away, and while some advise otherwise, but as far as the House is concerned, we've already impeach the Vice President, and so we will really leave it to the Senate as to when they will convene to become a trial court.
Thank you, Rosalie. For today's second question, let us call on Tina Pangilinan Perez from GMA7.
For Prosec Congroj, will you be requiring the presence of Vice President Sara Duterte during the impeachment trial?
Again, we've yet to talk about yung specific matters such as this. Di pa po, wala pa na pag-usapan. Not even yung usual na, like your question last time, wala pa po akong update, wala pa pong division of work, wala pa pong ganun details. But as for the calling of the witnesses, first and foremost, hindi pa po yun banggit, no? Hindi pa final. I can't say for sure if that we will call, although understandably it would be better for the it's actually the impeachment court will be able to, how do you call this, to mandate attendance naman po, no? But on the part of the prosecution team, definitely it would be better if the subject of the impeachment were there. If she were to be presented as a witness also by their defense, then we would have the opportunity also to cross-examine po, no? So sa kahit anong paglilitis po, mas maraming testigo, mas maraming ebidensya, mas maganda po. This goes both ways for the prosecution team and for the defense. Para po para lumabas po yung katotohanan. Any additional evidence or witness would be welcome po.
Sir, how much of the evidence is with the prosecution team already?
Without saying too much po, I think we have enough evidence. We have what we would say, I think it's more than enough, especially considering na, in our opinion, of course, depende pa rin po yun. Ang impeachment case po ay not strictly criminal. It's sui generis, we've always mentioned this, it's more akin to an administrative matter po, no? Kasi the penalty, it's not punitive, wala pong makukulong, wala pong fines and penalties na that would be implemented. Ang impeachment case lang po ang mayayari dito ay one, removal from office, and second, perpetual disqualification from public office. So hindi po siya strictly criminal. So yung strictest requirements of evidence that would apply to criminal case might not apply here. Depends, of course, on the impeachment court kung ano pong madesisyonan nila. At the end of the day, it would be a political exercise on the part of the senator judges and how they would vote. So, as far as we're concerned, I think we have enough evidence to at least convince our senator judges of why they should side with the prosecution on this part. But with that said, there would still be more avenues for additional evidence, definitely po. Especially kapag meron pong impeachment cases, there are some laws which actually have for their exemption impeachment cases for the request of more evidence. The power of subpoena, nandyan rin po yan sa impeachment court. So I'm pretty sure that the prosecution team will be open to all of these additional avenues to secure even more evidence po.
Sir, does that include yung ni-raise po ni Representative Conv na 12.3 billion peso unsettled financial transactions in DepEd during the tenure of the Vice President? Because he is calling on the House to investigate the issue. Therefore, wala pa yung ebidensya on this. So will that be included?
Well, if we take a look po preliminarily on the articles ng ating impeachment, nandun na po yung mga grounds natin, and one of it would be yung graft and corruption. This would really depend po on the appreciation of the evidence. Although it is alarming that there would be, ano po yung amount po natin, Ma'am Tina? 12 billion po.
12.3 B, sir.
12.3 billion, and this would be disallowances po ba?
Settled financial
unsettled
transactions.
So if it would be taken in consideration, kasi it's possible naman po, as what happens with COA, na may mga findings ang COA that are just in the regular course of business. But if it would be found to be in line with yung mga allegations po natin sa impeachment complaint, then I don't think the prosecution team would have any hindi po they will not shy away from making use of such evidence po siguro.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Tina. Bibian Gulia from ABS-CBN.
In connection with Ate Tina's question, are you also joining the call for the Good Government Committee to investigate the said transaction?
Unfortunately, as with many things po, as a member now of the prosecution team, I think I would have to exercise more restraint than other members of the House. I will not join the call, although we will anticipate eagerly any developments there. Kasi po, sa amin, because we already have filed the complaint, the House has already filed the complaint, and we are now anticipating the convening of the impeachment court. That would now be the proper venue for us to thresh out these issues. If the prosecution team feels na kulang pa po yung evidence or that they would like to seek additional evidence, the proper venue would also be through the impeachment court. Although nothing precludes po the House from conducting inquiries in aid of legislation as part of its legislative functions, and nothing would preclude other members of the House po to answer this call po ng kapwa congressman po namin.
On whether we plan to bring this up sa Good Government Committee, yes, ma'am. In fact, napag-usapan na namin yan ng ibang members dahil sa proposal ni Congressman Conghon, balak po talaga yung talakayin sa Committee on Good Government.
Also, Kong Rog, you mentioned that you have more than enough evidence for the prosecution on the impeachment trial of the Vice President. Why is there a need to request for the subpoena of the bank records?
Well, you don't stop po just because you know that you have enough evidence. No? For as much as possible, you would like to establish, even if you have a strong case, any prosecutor would like to have an even stronger case. Kung ang sa criminal court nga po naghahanda ang prosecutor for guilt, evidence that would prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt, to prepare for such quantum of evidence. So this means po no, na talagang we have to really establish our case. While the Senate impeachment court might settle for a lower standard of evidence, it still would never hurt your case to become prepared with even more evidence. And talagang aside from that, aside from just the objective of yung impeachment court, this is also venue po no para malaman na po yung katotohanan, kasi that has been a constant call po even in the House. Yung sa budget hearings po natin na hindi po nag-attend, hindi po tayo nalinawan kung ano ba talaga ang nangyayari noon nung mga committee hearings po natin sa good governance, committee hearings sa Quad, in cases na hindi po malinaw no yung ano ba talaga yung nangyari. So the impeachment court now, aside from a venue for redress in relation to these offenses, it is also a venue for the truth to finally be revealed po. So this is something that we like to stick to po siguro.
I think that's in relation to Article 4 po ba? Yung sa disclosure ng assets and properties sa SALN. But even without it, for example, if hindi i-grant yung subpoena, will the current evidence on that particular article stand?
We believe so. Actually, a lot of the push and pull in the complaint would be which articles to include, and by its inclusion and by its approval by not just 1/3 of the House but by 80% po no right now, I think that speaks volumes of the confidence that the House has in the evidence that would back these articles po.
Also, you mentioned earlier na may comments kayo no dun sa schedule ng impeachment trial. Are you saying na justified yung schedule ng impeachment trial to begin ng July after SONA?
I would not say justified po. I'm just saying as a reaction po no, sabi ni Ma'am Rose, as a reaction given the context of which SP Escudero has made his remarks, given the context na alam na po natin kung which interpretation the SP has adopted, given the context of yung daloy po ng proceedings sa Senate according to none other than the Senate President. I believe then that is the practical consequence. Yung timeline na yan would be the practical consequence. But as to the justification, we leave it up to them, we leave it up to the people to see if it is justified. As mentioned, we will not make any calls for the Senate to rush this, so that we would want to avoid any tainting of partiality, tainting of bias. But with that said, as mentioned, there are legal luminaries, sabi nga, nabanggit na po ni Kong Pami, that are of the opinion that they are of the opinion of a different interpretation po, no? Habang si SP Escudero ay nandun sa panig na ang interpretasyon dapat dito ay still within the bounds of Senate's legislative calendar, within the bounds of plenary action. Meron naman pong interpretasyon na kapag sinasabi ng saligang batas na the trial shall proceed forthwith, ibig sabihin agad-agad. And given na meron rin na interpretasyon na hindi ito legislative function kundi constituent power, ito ay mandato at authority within the Constitution itself that they can implement independent of legislative functions. Then there is also that yun na po yung interpretasyon na it should follow a faster timeline. So with the justification, it would depend kung alin ang interpretation po natin. Pero yun lang po, I was just commenting on the context of which the statements were made.
Having said that, kung July pa po yun, 20th Congress na po, is there still point for the members of the 19th Congress, prosecution panel under the 19th Congress to prepare for the impeachment trial?
Well, gaya ng sinabi pa namin before, ready or not, dapat, here or not, dapat mag-ready na po kami. Whether it would be as early as March or whether it would be in the next Congress, the prosecution team will do its job, having been elected by the members of Congress in its constitutional duty to pursue this impeachment case. It would not be, hindi naman po siya sayang if ever, for whatever reason na halimbawa it crosses the 20th Congress and there would be a new set of prosecutors. We would be glad po na at least we've done our part. Naka-ready na po yung ating articles of impeachment, naka-ready na po yung evidence, naka-ready na rin po yung mga witnesses that we would like to call, and we would happily pass it on po to the next batch if for whatever reason po.
Merong mga opinions na dapat ba i-refile pa, i-resubmit ba? Or yung new Congress, pwede bang maghain ng panibagong, or parang sabihin sa Senate na wag na ituloy yung impeachment trial? May mga ganun po bang? What's your opinion on that? Anong mangyayari kung 20th Congress?
Again, this would boil down to interpretation, but I think it's very clear po, no? Now that we have actually filed yung saligang batas, klaro naman po, the power to initiate impeachment cases is vested in the House, and this has already been done by the House. So we actually have pending impeachment complaint. So whether or not that could be stopped by the next Congress, I don't think it would be held by that. I understand meron pong interpretasyon na according to some legal luminaries na kapag tapos na pa yung 19th Congress, no business can be carried over to the 20th. But I think that was another, based on the interpretation po, on legislative functions po. I think a case that was cited for that was Garciliano versus, I forgot the specific case. Pero when I read it, particular naman po yun, that was regarding a Senate inquiry. Hindi naman po yun impeachment complaint, hindi naman po yun na constituent power. So, I leave it to that po, no, kung ano yung interpretation po nila doon. Pero for me, personally, my interpretation is that continuing po siya. An impeachment case filed now can still be tried the next. And we have, although it's not strict in the strictest sense, our basis, but historically, maganda po yung unang-una, may experience po yung United States po dito. As we know, our Constitution lifts some parts. It's based on US Constitution, US jurisprudence, their body of laws. And doon po sa US, nangyayari po talaga yon. Yung Senado po nila ay continuing body rin. And in, I think, 4 instances of impeachment, one Congress files the impeachment complaint, and it was already tried in the next Congress. So we have basis on that. Second, I am more akin to adopting the interpretation rin po ni SP Escudero. He gave a very logical example. When we look at our collegiate courts, for example, Supreme Court, when we look at the Court of Appeals, and look at Sandigan Bayan, kapag marami po yung ating mga huwes, marami po yung ating mga hukom, maestrado, just because yung isa po, halimbawa, yumaon na, pumanaw, or nag-retire, nag-resign, hindi po ibig sabihin nun, uulit po yung case, no? Tuloy pa rin po yung kaso. So I think these two put together would make more sense in the context of an impeachment complaint rather than yung refiling interpretation po.
Thank you, Bibian. Next questions will come from Earl Tobias of IBC 13.
Kong Pami, Kong Rocha, good morning po. On another topic po, House Majority Leader Manuel Dalipe, kinundin niya po yung pagpa-file ng cases against Speaker Romualdez and other House leaders dito sa cases na na-file sa pagpasa ng 2025 budget. On his words po, he said, any attempt to portray it otherwise is a clear distortion of facts and an attack of legislative process itself. Furthermore, sinabi niya rin po na parang diversionary tactic ito because more telling is the involvement of former Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez as one of the complainants. As a sitting member of the House during the deliberations of the 2025 GAA, he had every opportunity to raise objections, questions, and allocations. Your sentiments po.
On my end, I'd like to clarify that it is anyone's absolute right to file any case, and it's very good that they filed so that it can go through the proper channels and that the House leadership will squarely face that. Having said that, I want to take note that it's very ironic that Mr. Alvarez barely participated in the non-stop budget hearings that we've had for the 2025 budget, whether sa committee level or sa plenary. Wala naman siyang ni-raise na concern. Bilang Assistant Majority Leader, parati po akong nasa session floor, bihira ko po siyang nakita. So, nandun na po yung chance sana na kung meron siyang sisilipin, meron siyang mga tanong, masasagot na sana noon pa.
Additional lang po na siguro, not so much in the statement of Major Dalipe, but more on a comment lang po on the nature that they filed. I think, of course, kagaya ng sinabi po ni Kong Pami, we would always welcome and respect everyone's right to seek redress, seek grievance before the court. Tama naman po yun kapag nakikita po natin na merong cause of action, pwede naman talaga tayo mag-file. Ngunit, important rin tanongin yung whys po, no? Sa tingin ko po, although we don't want to impute any malice on the part of those who filed, it's just really questionable. Ako personally, without going into the context po no, na may prior redress naman po in the House na hindi naman po naitanong, yung pag-file mismo, I think if the question is really in relation not to politics but to the law itself, shouldn't it have been filed before the Supreme Court? Regarding Rule 65 po, usually kapag may katanungan po tukol sa isang batas, ang redress po na dun sa Supreme Court, hindi po siya criminal. Kasi po political function yung pagpasa ng batas, no? So, wala namang na-enrichment na alleged, I think, doon sa criminal nature that they are now filing. So, it's just curious po, no, on my part, bakit yun yung venue na pinili nila. And then, if we also look at the cast of characters, bakit I understand the issue is BICAM pero yung House lang po yung respondents, no? To which a member rin po si Kong Alvarez, like mentioned ni Kong Pami, that there would have been a prior, you could have questioned it naman before. So while we welcome po, no, I think it would have been better for the purposes, kung yung tanong lang po talaga yung issue ng mga blanco, it would have been better for the Supreme Court to rule on the procedures that the House would take, no? Na we stand by yung sinabi po ng ating leadership, we stand by po yung sinabi ni acting chair Kimbo na ginawa naman lahat to with authority ng BICAM. So if there's a problem with that authority, if it is flawed in any way, that should have been questioned rather than yung allegedly criminal act of filling the blank. So these are just some questions that I think po siguro na dapat may tanong ng taong bayan in relation to the context of the filing of that case po.
Itong ating programa mga kababayan, atid sa inyo nitong ating mga sponsors. Firmax, Firming and Lifting Cream. Pinapay po sa mga pulses in affected area. Mainam po ito sa mga pains at paninigas ng mga kaso-kasuan. Ito sa mukha naman yung application, anti-aging, Automax po siya. Ito ay Glow Zero mga kababayan. Whitening po siya. Made in South Korea. Ito naman po, Nengxia Red Mix Fruit Drink. Gawa po siya sa goji berry. May anti-cancer properties po siya. At sa mga nagana po ng malinis and spacious fitness gym, pumunta lang po kayo sa aming Colossal Fitness Gym. May Grab car rental din po kami. Po siya. Ito ay Glow Zero mga kababayan. Whitening po siya. Made in South Korea. Ito naman po, Nengxia Red Mix Fruit Drink. Gawa po siya sa goji berry. May po. Sa mga nagana po ng malinis and spacious fitness gym, pumunta lang po kayo sa aming Colossal Fitness Gym. May Grab car rental din po kami. At bills payment po sa aming office. At saka sa mga mahilig po sa mga imported bags, manood po kayo sa live selling ni Madam Eileen Rosales sa kanyang Eileen Closet po. Pati mga shoes, ito yung kanya po. Ito yung kanyang page. Kita ninyo, napakagandang mga online selling po siya. Si Madam Eileen Rosales. Cellphone number niya po, 773-798-7816.